there, we'll proceed into the questions. Questions were formatted by myself and Rob Bico, as well as submissions from Rotary Club members as well that we then formatted. So there are questions. If you hear yours, just know that we did do our best to format them.
Might have been tweaked just a little.
From there, once we pull the question, each candidate will have 90 seconds for a response. Again, it's not a debate, so there's no rebuttals. We'll just move on to the next question. It'll alternate between Rob and myself, pulling and asking the questions so that they're completely random. It will cover a host of topics. It's not zeroed in on any one particular thing. If you're here for the State Senate Forum, it's going to follow a similar format, but there's no lightning round. We want everybody to get a chance to hear as much as possible from our congressional candidates, so it will be just straight questions. Anyone have any questions about the format? All right. Well, with that, Rob and I did a coin flip, and Representative Mace. Oh yeah, let me go over the timing.
30. This is 30 seconds left in your time. Right. This is 10 seconds left, and this is stop.
You might need a wave. Everybody in the corner, just wave us down.
There we go. Yes. So that's the timing. And we did a coin flip, and Representative Mace will go first, followed by Representative Cunningham, and then it'll flip at the end. So, with that, I'm going to hand it off Representative Mace.
Thank you for bringing the mics. And thank you all for, I want to thank the Charleston Rotary for putting this event together. I want to thank Congressman Cunningham for being here today and joining all of us. We have a week out from the election, and I'm sure many of you have already voted, but I'm sure there's a few undecided voters out there. This is an exciting time. I never would have thought that 25 years ago I'd be the Republican nominee for Congress. 25 years ago, at the age of 17, I dropped out of high school. And I had no intentions of ever going back. I'm the daughter of a retired general and a retired school teacher. And my parents said to me, if you're going to stop going to school, well, certainly you're going to start going to work. And one of my first jobs at that time in my life was as a waitress at, you guessed it, the Waffle House. And I used to stand on a piece of duct tape about a foot long, and I would yell at the cooks in the back how my customers wanted their hash browns. Smothered, covered, and chunked. And I learned some very tough lessons during some very tough times in my life. I eventually was able to get my high school diploma, and a year later in 1996 is when the Citadel decided to let women in. And I raised my hand and I said, I'm going in. I didn't go there to be the first woman to graduate from there, but I went there because I had something to prove to myself. I had something to prove to my parents, that I could go to a place, that I could be challenged, that I could face adversity, that I could face an obstacle unlike anything I'd ever faced in my life, and that I could be successful. And I learned about having courage and confidence during that time. And those lessons in life have benefited me in so many ways. In business, I've been in business for the last 21 years. It's benefited me as a mom and as a state lawmaker. I've been in the State House of Representatives for the last 3 years. And I grew up here, I'm from here, I'm raising my family here, and I love the Low Country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to Historic Rotary Charleston for having me, for hosting this today. Thank you, Representative Mace, for being here. I also want to congratulate again Greg and Virginia for their marriage. Really, really big deal. Congratulations again. I got to tell you, it's been the honor of my lifetime to represent the Low Country in Congress. Just purely an honor. And you know, before 2017, I never ran for office before. And I ran for office because I was tired of seeing politicians up in D.C. who weren't willing to put people over politics or country over party. And I promised to be different. And you know, I know that we'll get into the issues and talk a lot about those, but in the last 2 years, that's what I've tried to do. Put people over politics and put country over party. And I know that today and throughout the campaign, you've heard my opponent talk a lot about Nancy Pelosi and, quite frankly, everyone else but me. But the fact is, during this last campaign, the very first day of my last campaign, I said I would not support Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House. And the very first vote that I took up in Washington, D.C. was voting against Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. I told the constituents in the Low Country that I would fight like hell to pass a bill banning offshore drilling, and that's exactly what I did. And I also told people I would work across the party lines, and I did. That's how I'm able to get Republican endorsements, like Republican mayors and council members, or the conservative U.S. Chamber of Commerce endorsement. I view this election as a choice. You know, and if you want politics to be more partisan or cutthroat or divisive, then I think my opponent will gladly take your vote. But if you want people to reach across the aisle and work together and achieve results no matter what letter comes behind your name, then I'm asking for your support, and I'm asking for your vote. Thank you again.
All right, this first question will be for Joe Cunningham. Of course, it's the longest question in this whole bowl. If the affordable... Is it? No. Get there. There you go. If the Affordable Care Act is struck down by the Supreme Court, what specific legislative steps,
Sorry, guys.
including ear-shattering noises, legislative steps would you support to address the needs of the estimated 100 million people who will be impacted by the court's decision?
That's a great question, and it's a great policy difference between my opponent and I, because first and foremost, you know, I believe we need to preserve the ACA. We need to keep with what works. We need to throw out what doesn't. And we need to come together in bipartisan fashion and fix everything else. I don't believe that we need to repeal the ACA and kick people you know, with pre-existing conditions off of their insurance plans. And that's what this administration is currently trying to do in front of the United States Supreme Court, trying to gut the ACA. I think there's some policy initiatives we can employ that will directly benefit those people who are either not insured or underinsured. You know, that's why I was proud to co-sponsor and get passed the Lower the Drug Acts Now piece of legislation, which drives down the cost of prescription drugs. I've actually been a part of at least a dozen pieces of legislation, bipartisan bills, that lower the cost of prescription drugs. Also, we need to look at expanding coverage, you know, and that's why I introduced introduced legislation that would expand coverage here in South Carolina, urging states to expand Medicaid. That's what we need here in South Carolina. That would impact literally thousands of families here. But we've also got a lot more work to do, like I said, in protecting those with pre-existing conditions. And you have to have a plan. And the ACA, while imperfect, I admit, was a plan. And you may hear other people talking about talking points like expanding, more competitive marketplace. That's not a plan. We need an actual plan in place. And if you're talking about repeal and replace the ACA, like so many people have chanted for a decade, they need to have a replacement plan on the table, and we need to see it. Because throwing people off their insurance with pre-existing conditions is strictly wrong and un-American.
Thank you.
All right, the next question is for Representative Mace. The pandemic has brought to light the digital divide in rural communities and low-income households. What will you do to assure that everyone has access to affordable, high-speed broadband internet?
That's a federal, state. Sorry, we seem to be having microphone problems here. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What the federal side of it, making sure that states have the funding, the ability to help make those decisions. The state of South Carolina has voted to try to expand and get access, for rural broadband. It is an issue, particularly now more than ever. I'm homeschooling my children. They're at home right now, and just in our area, and I'm in the city of Charleston, our internet goes in and out, and we're not even in a rural area. I'm in the city of Charleston in Berkeley County, and we struggle to have internet just right now, having to homeschool the children. I can't imagine the struggles, and the state of South Carolina has had to get very creative during the pandemic, getting Wi-Fi on buses and taking them out to rural areas to be able to do that. We've got to ensure that we get funding at the federal level down to the states to help make those decisions at that level. It's very important. Can I talk about healthcare a little bit if I have a few seconds? Or
As long as you're within time.
Yeah, within time. All right, thank you. Healthcare is an issue that I've worked on as a state lawmaker. What COVID-19 has really shown us is that there are a lot of regulations in place that have inhibited our ability to respond in a more effective and faster way at the federal, state, and local level. One of the things I've done as a state lawmaker is led an effort to repeal burdensome certificate of need laws that limit the number of beds in hospitals, limit the number of beds in nursing homes. Those sorts of actions that the governor temporarily lifted at the beginning of COVID-19. And when we're talking healthcare policy, we've got to talk about regulatory policy also. Thank you.
All right, this is for Joe. Can you check? Example for how you have worked to ensure equal access to quality education.
Yeah, I mean, can you hear me? Just saying, can you all hear me? That's what matters, right? Look, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I grew up in a public school system. You know, my son will go to the public school system. And so having a level playing field for all across the board, all South Carolina, all South Carolina families, sorry about that, is incredibly, incredibly important. And as Representative Mason pointed out, during these times where people are studying from home, we don't see that right now. With the lack of access to reliable and affordable broadband, this pandemic has basically brought to the surface a lot of inequities within our state. You know, when I hear the stories of parents driving their kids up to Bojangles parking lot or McDonald's or to the public library just to use the Wi-Fi to download and then submit their homework, it's heartbreaking. Just because of the zip code that they live in. So they're not on equal footing. That's why I'm part of the Majority Whip Jim Clyburn's Rural Broadband Task. It's why we passed a infrastructure bill that includes billions of dollars in expanding rural broadband. And that's something that is desperately needed here in this state and other parts of the country. But you know, there's a lot of other things that we can be doing right now. And you know, we opposed Governor McMaster's push to use some of these COVID relief funds to go towards only private education. We think that public and private should be on that equal footing. Again, that's well, again.
It's a smart microphone.
That was the one they were using in the truck.
Okay.
Turn it right off.
All right. The next question is for Representative Mays. What one... Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. For Representative Mace, what one issue would you most want to discuss with an undecided voter before they cast their ballot?
There are so many. I think right now, in the middle of the pandemic, people are worried about health care and jobs and feeling safe in their communities. It's having someone who understands and is able to pull all this together. Right now, South Carolina's unemployment rate is 5.1%. The national average is about 7.9%. The state of South Carolina, and I want to give hope for people as we move forward through this crisis right now, but we've done a pretty decent job of keeping people safe. Our COVID-19 numbers are low, but also allowing our businesses to reopen and get people back to work. And I want to support all those small businesses in our community because South Carolina's 1st Congressional District is really built on the backs of small businesses. And we've got to continue to have a low tax policy, pro-business, pro-growth policy here in the Low Country so we can continue to get to even better figures in terms of unemployment. Previous to COVID-19, right here in the Charleston market, unemployment was about 1.86%, far lower than the national average. And it was the lowest for women, for Hispanic Americans, for
African Americans, there's the lowest unemployment for anyone previous to COVID-19. And so I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to support our small businesses, to keep people safe. That's why we wear masks and we're 6 feet apart and we social distance. But there's a way to ensure that we are healthy, that we are safe, and that we continue to be able to grow our economy at the same time. Thank you.
We'll call everybody speak up and
We'll articulate.
perfectly capable of talking loud. Representative Cunningham.
I don't know if I like that face.
If elected, what changes, if any, would you support to reform the current U.S. tax code?
Well, we've seen some changes over the last several years, and what we were promised was tax breaks for everyone. And what we found were that the majority of those tax breaks, the vast majority of those tax breaks, went to the top 1%, the top 2%. And when I talk to business owners or I talk to working teachers or nurses, they're not reaping any of the benefits. And so we have a lot of inequities within our tax structure right now that don't favor the middle class, quite frankly. And I want to see more for that. I want to see for our students that are coming out of college and just getting into the workforce. I want to see more tax breaks for them and repaying student loans. I want to help people, find the equity that they need in order to start jobs and expand their businesses. But we cannot have a system where, we all saw the President of the United States disclose his taxes and pay $750. People have found a way to get around the system, and we need more clear and concise rules and laws, but not ones that just favor the top 1-2%. And again, this is going to have to be something that's bipartisan, working together, having Democrats and Republicans at the table instead of just a Republican idea or Democratic idea. And that's something that I've shown in Congress. Being the 4th most bipartisan member out of 435 shows you get results and you get people at the table if you're willing to work together.
Thank you.
All right, the next question is for Representative Mace. If elected, what is the top initiative you will pursue to help equip South Carolina educators to meet the challenges of teaching in a COVID-19 environment?
Is it working now?
It's just a dead battery.
For now.
I'm the daughter of a retired school teacher. I dropped out of high school when I was 17. So public school and education is very much near and dear to my heart. And as I'm homeschooling my kids right now, as they're at home doing virtual school, I see those challenges that our teachers are facing, that our children are facing every single day. And South Carolina is about 24th in the nation in per pupil spending, meaning half the country spends more, half the country spends less. And some of the statistics I've seen is that we're dead last in outcomes. And it's not enough to talk about equality, people being treated fairly. It really, when you talk about education, it's ensuring that the dollars get to the classroom and to the teachers, those who need it, as opposed to the administration and the bureaucracies that hold so much of that money up and spend it elsewhere. But also having equity in education, ensuring that no matter your gender, the color of your skin, your zip code, that you get the same education of someone who's in public school in a much wealthier district, ensuring that those students have access to internet, that they get iPads, that they have all of the tools that they need in order to be successful. And that might mean nutrition too for some of those who are in rural or urban areas that need that support. But we've got to make sure that we have equity at all levels in education in this country.
All right, the next question is for Congressman Cunningham. Protection of pre-existing conditions is the most popular part of the ACA. What does, quote unquote, protecting people with pre-existing conditions look like to you? And how will this be accomplished if the rest of the ACA is struck down by the Supreme Court?
Yeah, of course. And we talked earlier about some of the, I'll just. Yeah.
Zoom, they need to.
All right, sure. Can't forget about the Zoom. Our saying in 2020. I hope that doesn't eat into my time. Okay. All right. I'm old enough to remember when insurance companies discriminated against people with pre-existing conditions. I actually went through this myself. I had high cholesterol, and I had an insurance company deny me. And that's a very, very mild issue. But for an insurance company to say, no, we're not covering you, Imagine, when children with cancer, groups that I've met with personally, and one of the first meetings I had as a member of Congress was children with diabetes. These are children who inherited this through no fault of their own. They didn't win the genetic lottery with being 100% healthy, but they're striving to get through this. And it's hard. It's hard on these children. And it's even harder to add that extra layer of stress onto their parents, not figuring out if they can pay for 2 vials of insulin, one to keep at home and one to keep at school. That has been such a core part of the ACA, not allowing these companies to discriminate against people for pre-existing conditions. And again, that is what has made the ACA successful in some realms. But it's a core part of it, keeping kids on their parents' insurance plans until they're 26. These are all key parts of the ACA that we need to preserve. And it's important to remember that this health care plan came from Republican Mitt Romney. This shouldn't be about Democrats versus Republicans. I just hate how partisan things have become, because when someone's sick or going to the hospital, they don't ask you if you're a Democrat or Republican. This shouldn't be a partisan issue.
Representative Mace?
Yes, sir.
Should the federal government incentivize private investment into the development of alternate fuels? If so, how would you work to support the measure? If not, what is your plan to achieve sustainable clean energy policy?
And just for the record, before I dive into that, I'm against offshore drilling. I have a 100% rating with the conservation voters of South Carolina. And as a state lawmaker, alternative energy is something that I have supported and something that the state of South Carolina has worked on. In fact, we put together a bill last year, the year before, to help with solar energy here, and especially in Charleston's 1st Congressional District, we have a lot of neighborhoods that have solar energy, solar power, and I've supported measures where we didn't actually have to subsidize for solar to get those measures in place and create a better market for solar businesses to be here in South Carolina, in Charleston. So that's something that I have supported as a state lawmaker. And it's an exciting time right now. There's a lot of technology that is being developed in that space. And thankfully right now, until we get to where it is the dominant form of energy, we're net exporters right now of oil and gas, and we have a very strong economy as a result of that. But these are measures and things that I've worked on as a state lawmaker where we've been able to do it and not actually have to subsidize it. I think that the same thing could be said at the federal level. And I just want to say real quickly on pre-existing conditions previously, I actually have one. And I've been denied insurance coverage as a result. And Republicans and Democrats together have failed the American people when it comes to health care and ensuring coverage for those people. But that is an issue that is deeply personal to me, and I understand it firsthand, and it's something that I would work on as a lawmaker in Congress. Thank you.
All right, the next question is for Representative Cunningham. Can you name a federal infrastructure spending project that you support, and how will it benefit South Carolina?
I'm happy to name you several, actually. I was proud to work with South Carolina's delegation to bring back the funds we need to dredge the Charleston Harbor to its required depth. It's going to be the deepest port along the eastern seaboard. The deepest port. That's a claim to fame. That's something to be very proud of. As our auto manufacturing industry is growing here in South Carolina, it's important they have the required depth. I've got a brother who works in the harbor. I know Greg was a chief engineer on one of the vessels here. Our maritime industry is critically important, but it also ties to everything else throughout the Lowcountry and throughout South Carolina, even to the upstate. I can name you another infrastructure project. I was happy to bring back millions of dollars for the new bridge that's going to be going in over the Ashley River. That's a pedestrian bikeway bridge. It's going to alleviate traffic. It's going to get more people out of their cars. And it's going to connect West Ashley to downtown. And it's going to be a big boom for local businesses. These are tax dollars. We've been paying into the system for so long, and it's nice to be able to get back some of those infrastructure dollars that we've been paying into, because we all realize our roads and our bridges are crumbling. So having somebody who can reach across the aisle, work with both parties, especially in a divided Congress, to get those funds back for the Lowcountry, I think it's pivotal.
Education questions run amok. Representative Mays?
Yeah.
Do you support a national pre-K education initiative? And if so, what role should Congress play in making it affordable for states to implement?
I believe that states and our teachers in our communities, they know better how to educate than, say, a centralized federal government in D.C. doing that. So I would be encouraged and would support an effort that would give states the funding necessary to decide whether they want to have 4-year pre-K. It's something I've seen before and supported in the past with children. But I believe the state of South Carolina and our teachers should make those decisions as a state as a whole going forward. I think that is the fabric of our country. And if you get to the point where the federal government is making all those decisions, well, they're not always going to make the right decisions for us and for our communities. And as someone who's dropped out of high school before, I know that there are challenges that we have, but we've got some really great programs here in Charleston County, Wando High School, Academic Magnet. We've got great opportunities where we've, as a state and as a local community, have shown so much success. We've got to repeat that elsewhere. But I love all the education questions. My mom's a retired school teacher and appreciate it. I do want to note on one thing on infrastructure. It's something that's desperately needed down here. 2 years ago when the Wando Bridge broke down, that was in my State House district. And I had to work day in, day out for months on end getting questions answered for folks in our community so we could all get back to work, get our kids to school and to their activities. And so infrastructure, South Carolina's 1st Congressional District has an enormous need for infrastructure. The first committee I want to be on when I'm in Congress is transportation and infrastructure. Thank you.
All right, this question for this round we're asking of both candidates. So both candidates have adopted slogans such as Low Country over Party and Low Country First. What specifically does prioritizing Low Country mean to you? And we'll start with Representative Cunningham and then go to Representative Mace.
Thanks so much. Low Country over Party just means putting people over politics and doing the right thing even when it's against the will of your own party. And it's something that's not just a slogan for us. It's something to live by every single day. And again, you look at the endorsements we've had from Republican mayors, Republican council members, conservative groups. It's something we put into practice. And being the 4th most bipartisan at 435 is a testament to that. And I've taken several votes against my own party that has upset a lot of people. We've gotten a lot of angry emails and a lot of angry phone calls. But we did it because it's best for the Low Country. Whenever my party tried to pass a $15 minimum wage, we stood up against that. And we talked to Low Country businesses who said they either got to cut their employees or cut their hours. So we listened to them. When Congress tried to raise their own pay, I stood up against them for that. When they tried to spend a reckless budget that would add trillions to the debt, we stood up against that. It's about not being a rubber stamp for a party or a president. And I know, my opponent's on record saying I'm as pro-Trump as they come, which I didn't. It confused me and why someone would run, to put a party or a president first. But you look at our record, putting Low Country over Party is something we live by every single day. And again, we've taken some votes that have upset people in our own party, but we try to call them as we see them. And I think that's what the 1st District deserves and it's what it needs.
I grew up here, I'm from here, I'm raising my family here, and Low Country First to me is putting the Low Country first every single time, and it is not about party. I am a Republican, I'm a staunch fiscal conservative, and I'm a conservationist. For years, this district has been represented by someone who's had an independent voice or been an independent thinker. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, you're likely fiscally conservative like I am, we all believe we are, we're conservationists. But it's about putting our area, our neck of the woods first before anything else. As a state lawmaker, I'm the 4th ranked most fiscally conservative member of the General Assembly. I have a 100% rating with the conservation voters of South Carolina, higher than many Democrats. And yet at the same time, I've championed issues, whether it's women's issues, protecting women who are victims of rape and incest and domestic violence, whether long before George Floyd, I was working on bipartisan measures to support law enforcement in their training. I'm the only congressional candidate who's ever been endorsed by the South Carolina Fraternal order of police. Whether that was passing as a Republican and reaching across the aisle and working with Democrats to get prison reform done in this state, something I did this year in the middle of COVID. I had 100% unanimous. Every Democrat, every Republican in the chamber voted for that measure when it passed out of the House to be signed into law. But someone who's going to put the people here in our community before their party, and I've done it over and over and over again in every way, whether we're talking about the economy and jobs, healthcare, women, social and racial issues. I've done it as a Republican, and I'm very proud of that record.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Cunningham. If the next Congress pursues new regulations to reestablish fuel efficiency standards for private and commercial vehicles as well as rail, maritime, and commercial air transportation, will you support these measures? Why or why not?
Thanks for that question. I guess let's see what measures there are. And, Representative Mace spoke to this earlier about, incentives and for the, making this transition, encouraging growth within the renewable energy sector. I think there's potential for it. I think there's potential for a lot of growth. But it has to be done in a smart manner. It has to be done with buy-in from the private sector and public sector. And I think it should be done by using a series of carrots and sticks. I don't think companies should be polluting our air and polluting our waterways and then making a profit on top of it. And I think that those good actors who are trying to make that transition, Volvo is a great example of that, going to electric cars here soon. They recognize that is the future, and that's, I think, where we need to be putting a lot of our focus on. Down Paris Island, that military installation is run completely on solar panels, actually so much that they export energy off Paris Island. And I think that's a great example of kind of the future of what South Carolina can look like, and quite frankly, the country. But again, it's got to be a series of carrots and sticks. It's got to have buy-in across the board. But I think that if we're all looking to our future and we're looking at climate change as a real threat, then I think we all have to do our part to protect this country and protect this earth for future generations to come.
This question is for Representative Mace. What is your position on raising the national minimum wage, and how will your vote for or against it benefit or detract from South Carolinians?
I'm opposed to a national minimum wage. I'm a fiscal conservative. I believe in the free market and competition in that market. Previous to COVID-19, I said earlier, our unemployment rate here was about 1.86%. I spent a lot of time, I've been in business for 21 years, I talked to a lot of business owners, and I talked to one last year that has several fast food franchises, and the minimum wage he was paying his employees, because the market demanded it, was $15 an hour. We didn't need the federal government to come in and tell him how much to pay his employees. Those employees in that fast food chain were about to get a raise to $20 an hour. And here I am as a state lawmaker making $10,400 a year, and I'm thinking, maybe I need a new job. That was a very good economy for those individuals. And right now, we have this crisis, we have this pandemic, but our unemployment rate's about 5.1% here in the state of South Carolina. We're doing great compared to the rest of the country, but we can do so much better, and we've got to make sure that we have a fiscal conservative elected to office who understands and can be supportive of small businesses, that'll help lower taxes. I have a 100% record of voting to lower taxes, to support pro-business, being pro-growth here, to help our economy. We don't need the federal government demanding those wages. When they do it in the agriculture sector. It's much more difficult for those businesses to be successful, and we're seeing farmers really struggle with that. But it's something that I would not support. I believe in the free market and businesses to be able to make those decisions, and when the market is good, wages are great.
This question is from one of our Rotarians, and it's for Representative Cunningham. Okay. There has been much ongoing discussion in Washington and at the Federal Reserve about the need for additional fiscal stimulus from Congress to bolster the U.S. economy resulting from the harmful effects of the coronavirus pandemic. However, the U.S. debt has also reached its highest level compared to the size of the economy, federal debt to GDP ratio, since World War II, and is expected to exceed it in the next fiscal year. Finally, we get to the question, do you support additional fiscal economic stimulus, and if so, what specific stimulus measures would you support, and in what monetary range?
I'll answer as much as I can before I ask you to read it back to me in case I forgot anything. Short answer is yes, I do support another round of stimulus, and the answer is yes, I'm also concerned about our national debt. It's why I sponsored a balanced budget amendment. You know, we look at the trillions that we're adding on to the deficit and the debt. I mean, it's something that both Representative Mason, my children are going to have to pay back, or the generation following them. This is something that we're going to pass along to multiple generations, and it has to be reined in. And that's why I joined, the bipartisan group, the Problem Solvers Caucus, half Democrats, half Republicans. We put together a framework that had a spending package, not as big as what the House had asked for, and we put it out several weeks ago, and actually got praise from President Trump and his chief of staff. And it was what it would have done is more rounds of PPP funding, some money for local communities who are stretched thin right now. And again, it's that middle road that can achieve victories and gain bipartisan support. The point of releasing that framework around $1.5, $1.7 trillion was to get people back to the table, because I do think we can't go through the rest of the year without having another round of stimulus. In fact, we're seeing restaurants close throughout our community and small businesses shutter their doors, and it does need to happen.
That's a good one. Representative Mace.
Finally. Famous last words.
How do you propose to help our South Carolina workforce pivot to meet the demands of the 21st century economy?
Great one. Education. That's a big one. Having grown up here, we've been talking for 30-some years since I remember as a teenager. The talk was all about vocational, vocational, vocational. And in 30 years, we just haven't done enough. When businesses start up here or move here, at the Boeing 787 coming and all the suppliers coming with it, we don't have the workforce that can meet the demands of those jobs. We don't have folks that are trained in some of those technologies or trained in some of those skills to be able to do that. We've got to get back to finding ways where our children by 3rd grade, we have so many children in our communities that cannot do basic math or reading by 3rd grade. If they're not ready by then, they're not going to be ready for middle school. If they're not ready for middle school, they're not going to be ready for high school, and they're not going to be ready to get a job when they get out of high school. But we've got to go back to looking at ways that we can ensure, whether that's completing a high school diploma. I've drafted legislation that would allow folks that are over 18 and out of high school who dropped out to go back and get a high school diploma. If you get a high school diploma, you can earn more over your lifetime. Your children are less likely to drop out of school. But look at ways that we can ensure that students get the training they need to get a job. You want to be a welder at 18? You can make $75,000 a year as a welder with no education. I know a kid that I met a few months ago who learned to code at 16 on code.org. He's making $75,000 a year as an 18 going on 19-year-old out of high school. He's not going to college. He's doing that right here in the county of Charleston. And so we've got to do a better job of finding those opportunities for our students, getting them trained, and reminding ourselves you don't always need a 4-year or 2-year degree. You can make a great living if you're trained and have the skill set to do so with the education.
Thank you. There you are.
All right, Representative Cunningham. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? Compared to most small to medium-sized companies, the largest corporations doing business in America today pay their fair share of taxes. Are you in favor of re-examining the corporate tax rate and how it is applied? If it decreases U.S. debt, or helped pay for a faster recovery from the coronavirus pandemic?
I get the multi-part questions, right? Let me try to answer this as best I can. You know, I was speaking with an employee of Amazon this past week who lives here in Charleston, works remotely. And Amazon is doing pretty well through this pandemic. Nobody worry about Jeff. He's going to make it through the winter. But the fact is, it's the small businesses that are suffering right now. And, you know, we see it all across, you know, throughout our community. Justine's Kitchen, you know, I used to live above there when going to college here. But they shut their doors. And these aren't just like businesses. These aren't just restaurants. These are more like landmarks in Charleston. It kind of makes us who we are here in the Low Country. And so, you know, we've sought to direct relief through this pandemic directly to those small to medium-sized businesses. You know, that's why I worked with Majority Whip to make sure that, you know, $25 billion was allocated to these small banks that serve smaller communities and minority-owned businesses so they can survive. And another $25 billion for the medium-sized businesses. But, you know, we can talk about the taxing structure and how to make it more equitable, but right now, businesses are faced with whether or not they can keep their doors open, whether or not they can continue paying their employees. And that's why we're pushing leadership on both sides of the aisle to get back to the negotiating table, hammer out a deal, realize that we can't let perfect be the enemy of good, and that we're not all going to get what we want. But we need some more relief, and we need some more help for small businesses.
Representative Mace, what do you think the role of government should be in helping to pay off or refinance student loan debt?
Well, as someone who graduated from college with debt, had to pay it off on my own over a number of years. During COVID-19, during this crisis, I was pushing for policy that would allow our students or college graduates to be able to write off their insurance and student loan payments. That's something that the federal government can do. I don't think that the federal government should pay those student loans off, but we can find ways to make it more affordable for those students who are college graduates, allowing them to write off interest or write off some of those loan payments as they're paying them back. One of the reasons that education is so expensive today is in part because the government has subsidized a lot of it. And at the state level, I've seen it as a state lawmaker. We'll go through the budgeting process every year and we'll say, you know, each university gets so much funding each year, and we ask them to promise not to raise tuition, and then what happens? They turn around 6 months later and raise tuition. So we've got to make sure that we incentivize them. And one of the ideas I've had as a state lawmaker too is making sure that if they're going to get funding from the government, that they don't raise tuition for 4 years, the 4 years that student is in that program or is in that college or university. We've got to find ways to ensure we can keep costs lower for those students, and there are ways to go about doing that at the federal and the state level.
The next question is for Representative Cunningham. What are the top 2 to 3 issues affecting young voters today, and how will you work to address them?
No, that's a great question, and you know, spoke earlier today about students who are coming out of college right now, and there's been these different times in our recent history where kids are coming out of college and trying to enter the workforce at a time that's less than opportune, whether it be, you know, the generation came in right after 9/11 that were unable to find a job, or during the recession, and now during COVID. And you know, I'm still paying off my student loans. You know, my wife and I pay the equivalent of a mortgage on student loan. I recognize the burden that places on people, making college and university more affordable, but also give them the opportunity to write off a little bit more of that debt to try to put them on equal footing. But you know, the most critical way we can help young voters who are entering that workforce is make sure we get our economy back up and running and get back up and running safely. And again, this goes back to fighting for more stimulus, more relief funds. And by allowing them the opportunities to enter into the workforce, one that's booming. I mean, it was booming here in South Carolina before this pandemic hit, and we want to make sure we get it back to that level, because there's a lot of opportunity here in South Carolina and an exceptional amount right here in the Low Country.
We're not doing them all. Representative Mace, do you believe all candidates for public office should be required to disclose their tax returns? Why or why not?
Well, I know when you're running for federal and state office, you do disclose your sources of income and where they come from. We've all had to do it, and you can go on the FEC.gov and look it up and see that. You can do it for those that are running for state and local office as well, going to the South Carolina Ethics website. So those disclosures they already exist in terms of where your income comes from, the sources of it. And you do that annually, you file it every year. So for folks that are looking for that information, it is out there. I support that measure. And in fact, when I ran for State House the first time, there wasn't a requirement to say specifically where your money was coming from, just or the amounts or whatever, of where your sources of income were. And I disclosed that year and every year going forward, not only the sources of all my income, but the amounts as well. So everybody, would know that. I think it's really important to be transparent and hold our elected officials accountable. And that's one way that we're able to do that.
All right, and this will be the final question round, and then we will move to closing statements to be respectful of everyone's time here as well as our candidates' time. Representative Cunningham, do you support higher taxes on the wealthiest Americans to offset U.S. debt?
No, what I support is just an equitable tax policy. I see, so many loopholes and so many corporations and so many people taking advantage of the system right now, and that is so complex that the average person, it's impossible for them to understand. And, I know when we saw this last tax policy that went in effect a couple of years ago, we were told that it was going to benefit the small businesses, medium-sized businesses, working Americans. And we saw that the vast majority of those benefits went to the top 1-2%. And again, this is about making it easier for people to live, not harder. And we pay a lot in taxes. And it's important that we get something in return for those taxes as well. That's why I've worked to pull back money for infrastructure or other projects. But again, anybody who takes a look at our tax policy realizes how cumbersome it is and how it's tilted to one particular side. And we just want a level playing field. Simple and put.
All right, Representative Mace, you touched on this a little bit ago. In your many conversations with South Carolina employers, both large and small, trade unions and workers, which of the initiatives that they discussed with you will you work to pursue in Congress?
Well, I've talked to a lot of businesses and employers. I'll share a story. Last summer I was talking with a business owner who ironically owns a commercial insurance business. And he's got 20 employees, 12 are full-time. And his insurance premiums went from $1,200 a month per full-time employee to $2,000 a month. There was a 67% increase on those expenses. And he said, I pay 100% of those healthcare premiums for my employees, but if it goes up one more time, I can't afford it. It's over $20,000 a month that I'm paying right now, and neither will my employees be able to do that. Healthcare is a huge expense for every hardworking American right now. And we've got to find ways, whether and Republicans and Democrats have fumbled on this issue, they have created this problem. You have Democrats who created Obamacare, healthcare prices went up. Republicans said they would repeal it and replace it with something else. They didn't do that. So within whatever framework that we have moving forward after this election cycle, I would want to work within that to ensure that prices go down and the quality of care goes up. We can do that by allowing folks to purchase insurance across state lines. We can do that by removing cumbersome regulations. Like you can't get catastrophic insurance today under Obamacare over the age of 30. That makes no sense. For a family of 4 a few years ago, that was $250 a month. COBRA is like $1,900. Finding ways that making prices transparent on pharmaceuticals or on inpatient, outpatient, for surgical procedures, you name it. There are ways to go about finding small parts and make a big difference within whatever framework we have. But I know that is an enormous cost and burden to hardworking Americans. It's something I hear about over and over and over again from everybody, and something that I am intent on working on when I get to Congress.
Thank you.
And we want to thank everyone that submitted questions. That concludes the question round. We'll now move to closing statements, and it's in the reverse order that we started, so it'll start with Congressman Cunningham and conclude with Representative Mace.
Well, first off, I want to thank you all again for giving your time up here today, whether it be on Zoom or in person. My dad always said the most valuable thing you can give someone is your time. So thank you for that. I recognize that 2020 has been very tough on a lot of us and a lot of businesses, and just want to let you know that our office continues to be there for you should you need us. I also want to thank you for your work within the community. What the Rotary does, it makes it a special place to live here in Low Country. You know, Winston Churchill said, "You make a living by what you earn, but you make a life by what you give." So what you all give back to the community is building lives. It's making lives better. So thank you all for that. And I also want to just remind you all that get out and vote. Whether you vote early, vote in person. No matter which candidate you vote for, it's important you exercise that constitutional right to vote. And we've been working hard these last 2 years to be bipartisan, to operate with Democrats and Republicans. And I always feel like if you do that in a transparent manner and you're open and honest to people, then that's all you can do. I recognize you may not have been with me on every single vote along the way, but know that I've always tried to do it the right way, to be open with everyone, and to let you know where I stand and why I stand there. Thank you again for this opportunity, and be well.
Thank you all for being here today. I want to thank the Congressman again for joining us this afternoon. About a year and a half ago, my daughter Ellie, I'm a single working mom of 2 kids. I'm an 8th grader and a 6th grader. My youngest Ellie, she's 11. She came to me one afternoon. She goes, "Mommy, I'm Christian. I need to learn more about Jesus Christ. I need you to take me to church." And a few days later, I found myself in church for the first time in a very, very, very long time with my 2 kids. And I did not spontaneously combust. I lived to see another day. But the sermon that afternoon was about being at a crossroads and looking for the good path. There are 2 paths we can take, and looking for the good path and walking in it. And I was going through my divorce at the time, and I was deciding whether or not I was going to run for re-election for State House or run for this seat. And as that moment struck me, tears came down my cheeks, and my son, who's 13, he put his arm around my waist. He goes, "Mommy, I love you. It's going to be okay. We're going to be okay." And I knew at that moment, whatever decision I made, whatever challenge I had in life, we were going to be all right. And as I see where we are as a community, as a state, and as a nation right now, we are sitting at that same crossroads. And so I'm asking this election year that we look to our neighbors, we look for the good path, that we don't allow our disagreements to cause division, that we look for the good path this election and we walk in it together no matter what. In November, not even before November 3rd, that we start rebuilding our communities and our country now. Let's not wait until election. Let's do it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. And can we please give them both a round of applause? I also have a request for you. We help support James Simmons Elementary School by supporting their library. There is a library book in front of Representative Cunningham. If you could autograph that and then pass it to Representative Mace for her to autograph it, then we will send that to the school. And we appreciate how civil this discussion has been today. It's been a painful process for all of us recently, in a painful year. And we know that as Americans, one of the wonderful things is that we do have the ability. We are a democracy. We have the ability to vote, and we have a clear and peaceful transfer of government. And that is what we all pray for right now. Okay, coming up next week, we will have District Governor Pauline Levesque on Zoom. So please do not show up here. We will not be here next week. We will be on Zoom. The week after it, we will be back here November the 10th, and we will have Brigadier General Brad Owens as we recognize Veterans Day. The following Tuesday, November 17th, we will have Will Haney, the mayor of Mount Pleasant, speaking. And then the following Tuesday, we will be off for